Thank you all so much. We're going to keep things moving to make sure we keep everyone on time. Hopefully you got some sustenance in your system now with some coffee and some snacks. We also put some candy on your table, which is, for me, much needed in the afternoon. So make sure you get your candy as you go through the next kind of phases of the summit. So we're going to have a presentation and then have more of an interactive thing going on for the afternoon. So I'd like to invite Jim Murley to come back to the stage.
And I'm going to invite Pat Morris to join me. Two of us are really spoiled. We work for one of the greatest elected officials right now that I know of in our state, Mayor Daniella Levine Cava, a social worker, a volunteer, a person who created her own organization called Catalyst Miami, a person who was frustrated that the work that she was embedded in was not making a difference, so she said, I'm going to run for office. And so she became a county commissioner in one of our 13 districts. And then she was still frustrated because she was often not in the majority vote, getting things done. So she realized the way you make change is you go for the whole thing, and you go for mayor of the largest county in the state of Florida, 7th largest in the United States. Our mayors are elected countywide. They are the county administrators. They are the chief executives. 30,000 employees report to her. And she won, and her whole approach to being mayor is really captured by what we're talking about today. So what we're doing today is talking about how she began her first term, and she's about to be reelected. She hasn't officially been reelected, but we think she'll be reelected to a second term. But how she began thinking about what she was going to do with that authority and responsibility and accountability she'd been given for 4 years. How does she set her agenda? So Pat is going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the implementation of a transition plan for a mayor, because that's my job. Both of us work directly for the mayor in different capacities. But we'll try to explain how what we've been talking about, when grasped by an elected leader who has the vision, can take it and implement it. And that's, I think one of the, it relies on a person willing to take risk. But with that, they can lead and they can move a community forward, as we've seen in our community. So, Pat, would you talk about Thrive 305?
Sure, I'd be happy to do this. So I got a 135-page document here just to show you how cool Jim Murley and I are. Our last slide will have a QR code. Some of you may know what that is. So we had someone much younger than us put it in there for us. But you'll have an opportunity at the end to grab that QR code and then get this document yourself. If someone can't do that before today or tomorrow, I'll give you my card. Be happy to send you the link to it as well. So this is a really good look. Oh, is this? Am I using this? Okay, got it. All right. Well, let's get past that one. Okay. So I'm here with Jim. I'm the mayor's director of civic and philanthropic partnerships. Have the pleasure to work with Jim Murley. I've known Jim for many years, and he truly is one of the most respected people in Miami-Dade County, not just for the work he does in resiliency, but just because he's such an honest, ethical, smart person that everybody goes to him when they need to talk about anything related to the county. And when the mayor talked to me about joining her team, the first guy I called and had a breakfast with, remember, I forget that little threefold place and that we had breakfast with to talk about, like, should I really do this? I had been running Wells Fargo's philanthropy from Key West to Palm Beach, and kind of was really loving what I was doing, but I got a call from the mayor, and it was hard to say no. So she did say something to me, Jim, which aligns exactly what you said. I had coffee with her when she was a commissioner, and she told me she was going to run for mayor, and I said, really, like, what, are you crazy? you want to run for mayor? I mean, do you really need those headaches? And she said, Pat, the one thing I learned being a mayor, being a commissioner, 6 years, she said, you got to stay in your lane. Because somebody else has homeless, somebody else has mental health, somebody else has the environment, somebody else is talking about resiliency. If they're there, I can't get in that lane. And I realized as the mayor, you can be in everybody's lane, anybody's lane, because they're all your lanes, and the commissioners come into your lane. And so that was like a really profound thing. As soon as she said that, I knew she was running for sure. And so one of the interesting things that happened is, again, it's just, some of it is just how things work out in life. I had been working with someone from the Ford Foundation to try and get the president of Ford Foundation to speak at a Greater Miami trustee lunch, chamber lunch. And in that conversation, it didn't work out. He couldn't come. We started talking about what else was going on. I was talking about our great new person who's running for mayor. He's got a good shot. And he said, Pat, we have funding something in a couple of cities, Chicago, down in Houston, one or two other places, called the Talking Transition. I said, what is that exactly? So he proceeded to tell me, it's a way for new elected leaders to listen to the community first, for the first 6 months, before they come out with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And obviously there's some campaign promises they made that are going to be integrated in here. I said, that sounds amazing, and I think we have the mayor who may be interested in this. So literally, a day later, I had 15 minutes on the phone with her, and I said, Mayor, would you, I called her Daniella back then. Now I can't seem to get Daniella out of my mouth. It's always Mayor. But I called Daniella, and I said, Commissioner, this is an amazing thing. I looked at what they've done in Chicago. I looked at what they did in Houston. They want to help make this happen for you if you get elected. And they'll put some money into it as well. So the other number that I know is going to be asked is, how much did this cost? It wasn't cheap. It was $500,000. And it was 6 months worth of work that led to this. And it was a consultant out of New York that came down, but we worked, it was 2 consultants and a bunch of people from the county who made this thing happen. And so I put that out there. Was no public money. The Miami Foundation was our fiscal agent. Ford Foundation came in with $200,000. The Knight Foundation came in with $200,000. Allegheny, our partners at Allegheny came in. Several other small funders love what they were doing, and we're excited to work with the mayor, many of which they knew from her days as a social worker and a leader in the nonprofit sector in Miami. So if you jump back to the beginning of her election and then moving into being elected, Thrive 305 was happening, and 3 really kind of critical things in our community were happening. Gigantic surge in gun violence impacting communities from Homestead up to North Miami. Every community was being impacted by it. COVID-19 was right in the midst of rearing its very ugly head. And then there was the collapse of the Champlain Towers in Surfside. The mayor was there every single day for 33 days during that campaign, and really, I think, built a big piece of her trust in the community, because everybody saw somebody who they didn't really know actually standing up in the cameras every day and talking about what was happening in Surfside. And so I think she built a lot of capital there. And I think that the theme that came through from a new mayor, one of immense hope and a constant reminder of the power of communities to pull together in mutual support in times of greatest need. And that is exactly what she did. Stood with the governor behind her, the lieutenant governor, congressmen, congresswomen, senators, every day talking about what was happening, and really, I think, set the tone that maybe no other way she could have done it, about her mayoral journey was going to be different than anything we'd seen before, just from that kind of cooperation that we saw there. So Thrive 305, at the end of the day, is 40 actions, which are in Thrive 305, that are grouped under 12 key resident priorities. The action plan is the roadmap for addressing the people's priorities, responding to our community's expressed needs, to very complex issues, and we are tackling them and the approach that we are leading and moving forward with the resident voice towards implementation. So I'm going to just touch on a couple things. Table of contents talks about the story, not much more than what I just said. What is Thrive 305? Again, I just mentioned. Talking a little bit about what the strategic planning process was, what our objectives that came out of that. I'll mention it again, but the mayors, and part of why Jim and I are so excited about being here, the mayor's 4 initiatives, she calls them her 4 E's, are environment, economy, engagement, and equity. And everything we do is probably got a piece of those 4 E's in it. Talk a little bit about the action plan and priorities, and then the Thrive 305 going forward piece, and probably the most important comment that I'll make while I'm talking here is the fact that what we did, well, this is kind of what Thrive 305 is, the Ford Foundation consultant that we work with said to me after this was over, when I was telling him, okay, this isn't just going up on the shelf in all these directors' departments, from transportation to water and sewer to the resiliency work, it's actually being implemented. He said, well, what do you mean by that exactly, Pat? And I said, well, I'm not sure how it's worked in the past, but in this case, at the end of this plan, all the directors from all the departments and assistant directors and other folks were all involved in this, and into their work plan and into the budget planning process were these action items. And he said, Pat, I've never seen that happening in anything that Ford has done like this. So that was a significant piece. And, you know, for this mayor who is a huge civic advocate and comes from the nonprofit world, it was there was no brainer. It's like, why do this if there's not going to be a strong implementation plan? So now we are maybe, what, Jim, year three, I guess. That's still in their plans. We're still talking to them about where they are with it, and there's an accountability there that they're seeing as we kind of go forward. So these are our key goals. The actions highlighted in this action plan are the product of over a 7-month effort. And in Miami-Dade County, it was the largest public engagement initiative by Miami-Dade County government in our history. The guiding principle behind Thrive 305 was simple, that government works best when it is driven, informed, and led by the people who it represents. And that is something that was a piece of everything that we did. And as we look at these pieces here, there's a couple. I mean, I won't go into too much here, but, you know, we started by really looking at data, both quantitative and qualitative, on our resident priorities. We ended up engaging about 25,000 surveys. We had 25,000 individual surveys that folks responded to, with over 400,000 questions answered about what residents want to see the mayor doing as we go forward. So that was a big part of it. Empowering residents, again, you know, how do we inform, inspire, and hold county government accountable to our residents? And as we talk to our nonprofit partners and our municipal government partners, and we got 33 different municipal governments, little cities in Miami-Dade County, we engage them as well. We worked with a whole host of community partners. A nonprofit that the mayor founded was called the Human Service Coalition. Now it's called Catalyst Miami. I know you know Catalyst Miami, probably Miami. You know, was one of our great partners, along with literally hundreds of other ones. And, you know, weave through this whole process was ensuring that this was not the mayor's priority, it was the residents' priorities. And we'll talk about that a little bit, and Jim will talk about how it got integrated. Again, great philanthropic partners to make this happen, great local community partners. We put together a program framework that was designed to create opportunities for residents and county staff to be engaged. We had 17, during COVID, 17 different virtual and live in-person meetings where residents came out, and they were facilitated by county employees. So in parks, in transportation, there was a person who was there, and they were talking about everything that the residents want to do. It was a very facilitated process. But one of the things that happened for me as a new guy to government, I've been in other things in my life, first time in government, it charged up employees who are doing the work of the county every single day. And they saw a commitment and a buy-in to listening to residents that they'd never seen from any mayor. I've known the last 3 mayors before my mayor, that not a chance that anyone ever came near to listening to residents like she is. So that was a big piece of it and showed that this is something that's important to her. And so part of what happened is they were involved in listening to those residents, but then when they went back to parks or transportation or water and sewer or resiliency, they understood what the residents were saying and the fact that they were going to be that person integrating and implementing what the residents had said they want. So that was, I think, a very unique piece to this. Again, talk a little bit about the timeline here. Started in December with the project initiation. We had Civic partners onboarding over a couple of weeks in January, and that was really getting them bought in. And in many ways, it was our Civic partners, Chambers of Commerce, Rotaries, Optimist Clubs, not your normal organizations, Chambers of Commerce, small ones, the big ones, everybody had the opportunity to reach out to their members and their constituents to get them involved. So we had Saint La in Little Haiti, and we had the Mexican-American Council that works with Mexican farm workers down in Florida City and Homestead, recruiting people to come to a session that was out there. So we really had an amazing reach into the community to, what one of our speakers were talking about earlier, like how do you get to the non-usual suspects? That was something that was very intentional by the mayor to make sure we did that. I talked about in February, we did our county survey, got great feedback from that. We developed and then trained our staff ambassadors to get out. And then it was during Civic Week that we really focused on, that was the week where we had sessions everywhere in the county that you could go to either virtually or in person, and some were virtual and in person. But we engaged, hundreds and hundreds of close to 1,000 actually, in both the virtual and the in-person workshops that we did. And then, part of was spending time after we got all that data and that feedback and working on putting the action plan together and then aligning it with the strategic work that the mayor wanted to do and how some of those things were aligning with what the residents wanted. And in a couple of cases, there were things that she thought was important, and it didn't rise to the level of interest by residents. And other things, and as an example, our parks were, during COVID, places where people went to. And so part of what we heard from people is they wanted more investment in parks. They wanted smaller pocket parks. They wanted more activities in parks. And we found out that that was all as a result of many of them went during COVID to a park. So we got that feedback, and that's, that made the Parks Director extremely happy because some of the budgeting that happened that next year was reflected on the input of what we saw here in the action plan. So let me just hit that. Again, I mentioned this earlier. The mayor's 4 E's that she talks about are the environment, and I won't go through the details, but it's a well-managed, built, and natural environment that is resilient to climate stressors. Mr. Murley will touch on that. Economy, which is a growing and inclusive economy that creates jobs and invests in local talent while spurring innovation and investment for the jobs and assets of the future. This was right at the time literally 3 years ago when we were getting quite a few very wealthy folks, one from Chicago, you probably know, Ken Griffin, who kind of moved to Miami. And not only did it come with buying a building and, you know, he's got 50 employees. I think they expect to be 350 or 400 next couple of years, but he brought his checkbook. And he has committed in Miami-Dade County that it's the kind of money he gave in Chicago is what he's going to be doing in Miami-Dade County. And that was about $125 million a year. So we're really excited about that. He's immediately become the single biggest donor, I think, in Miami-Dade County and some of the things he's invested in. But part of this was looking at one of the goals that came out is how are we intentionally talking to new folks that are moving to Miami-Dade County, BlackRock and others that are moving here, and we're going out to them. And so part of what the mayor is saying, we want your knowledge, we want your jobs, we want all of those things, and thank you. And by the way, what's your strategy for a civic footprint? What's that going to look like? And she's helping them. Right now, I'm one of the guys who talks to a lot of these folks about how do I get them involved in boards? You're interested in animals or parks or whatever. How can we get you involved? So it's exciting that that is one of the action items that came out of this plan. And now, 3 years later, we probably talked to 30 different companies where that's being implemented. So her third is equity, where our residents and workforce are fully included in all aspects of life in the county, regardless of who they are, and engagement, something that is weaved into everything that we do. A community that trusts local government and has timely access to data and information in order to obtain services and influence decision-making in the county. So that's getting close to the end here. I'll kick this over to Jim. This is an example of the action plans. These are a couple of the priorities: accessible county government, engaged and empowered residents, housing that people can afford. I won't read all of the rest of them, but to give you an idea, at the end, invest in blue-green jobs, resilient communities designed by and for residents. And so all of these have a champion. So in resilient communities designed by and for residents, that's Jim Murley. And so what we thought would make sense was how do we integrate what we're doing and give you an idea of how this plan got integrated by a great chief and the work that he's doing and how it's impacted not only the work his organizations, his department's doing, but also the budget as well related to some of the new things you're doing. So we'll kick it over to him and then we'll open it up for questions. So
Thanks, Pat.
Let me keep going here for you?
Yeah.
We keep going or?
Yeah, this is still out of the book.
No, that's...
Yeah, stop
There
on the
you-
resilient communities. Look, this term resilience gets thrown around a lot recently. And it's important to calibrate it to how it makes sense in your community. The way we use it, it's uses a framework that was developed by the Rockefeller Foundation around stresses and shocks. The shocks are often those things, and the way you hear resilience a lot in the context of climate change and weather events. So, we're used to that in Florida every year, getting ready for hurricane season, that shock that might come, as it did to Fort Myers Beach or up recently in the Panhandle. It could be a building collapse. It could be the shock of the oncoming event. When we were developing our resilience plan, we had an episode of Zika, which is a waterborne disease. We were able to manage it, but in putting the plan together, this is 2019, we said we need to be prepared for shocks like this in the future. So we added at that time, prepare for pandemic events. So we learned from that shock, added to the plan, and then all of a sudden we were dealing with it at a massive scale. But the important thing, I think, for a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of equity and engagement is the stresses, because these are the things that we have to manage all the time. Affordable housing, income disparity, equality, transportation, mobility. We look at the shocks and stresses together when we think about resilience in our capacity. So the Office of Resilience in Miami-Dade County is set up to make sure that across those 28 departments and 30,000 employees, 34 cities, numerous other public, private, and not-for-profit players and partners and stakeholders, that we're keeping some of these major goals that Pat talked about in front of us. Nobody can accomplish them all in a single organization, but we can leverage the resources, public and private and not-for-profit, as we go forward. So our office has grown in capacity as this concept of resilience is woven in across the county and with our partners. So we do look at the traditional issues now that have grown up around climate, how we could reduce carbon out of everything we do, which hopefully will slow the warming of the atmosphere and all the many impacts that are coming from that. Knowing that, we still know that we'll have to adapt regardless, that we're going to have changes. And so we have a adaptation section, a mitigation section. I'll skip communication and come back. Extreme heat is an addition. It's an impact that we anticipated just in time for the warmest, hottest season we've ever experienced in Miami-Dade. And extreme heat is directly related to the climate change issues. But the fact is that extreme heat is experienced at a level in our lower income communities far differently than it is in the communities that have the means to have air conditioning and shady streets and other things. So it's a recognition that the communities that are really suffering from the change in the temperature, especially at night. What happened in Miami this summer was it never cooled off at night. And that's when the communities that didn't have the luxury of others in our community were really suffering. So our investment has gone to that. We also, I think Joe mentioned the importance of place. Our community is built around Biscayne Bay, just like Tampa Bay is so important to Tampa and Tampa. It's a place you could acknowledge it. You know, you enjoy it. You know it's part of your economy. You're branded with it. So the mayor said we have got to include the central environmental asset of what makes us enjoy living in Miami-Dade as part of thinking about resilience. So she moved the whole Biscayne Bay effort under us so that we could, again, link that across all the departments. Zero waste has been the latest addition because if you are handling 500 million tons of waste a year, that's what the county, across the board. And I think here they do a pretty good job of trying to think about it. But we create so much waste. And most of us think about it as just getting rid of it and putting it out in the street and somebody picks it up, right? And takes it away. Well, the away for Miami-Dade County was a waste-to-energy facility, a nice term for an incinerator. Then our incinerator burned down. So we are in big doo-doo. And we're having to deal with that massive amount of waste that comes from everything we do and figure out new creative ways to address that. So the mayor said, we're going to do that. We have to put the Band-Aids on. We have to address that issue in the next 5 to 10 years. But zero waste came in under our umbrella with the goal of reducing waste by 90% by 2050. So that's the way she approaches it. She goes at it in terms of addressing the issues and bringing some kind of an action to address it, but then thinking long terms about how do you really eliminate that issue in the future. So I skipped over communications. We made that a separate section in the office because it's so important in a community like Miami-Dade, but I know you all agree in everything we do. So we have to do everything in Creole, Spanish, and English, and we have to be able to, get all the information out as much as we can in those three languages. We have to be adept at social media. We have to use all the things that have been talked about by the speakers. So we didn't want to talk about communication just as sort of a responsibility of the other parts of the office, but have a specific unit that addressed it so that it became primary in all the work we did. The Thrive 305 report then ends up in these implementation reports that are created by those sections. These are measurable, quantifiable activities that end up in the budget. I can't stress how important that connection that Pat made in his remarks. You've got a $12 billion budget a year. You have got to be able to prioritize even though that sounds like a huge amount of money, and it is, you have got to be able to prioritize it among many needs and show the public that the things we wrote about and talked about are being implemented in that budget. We have a standard budget process at any county and city has in Florida. Right around August, September, you're adopting your budget in 2 public hearings. Just last month, the second public hearing, where that entire budget was getting adopted in public with the county commission, it lasted a little over an hour and a half. It was the shortest budget meeting that the county's ever had, because the public and her 13 commissioners, who she works with, felt that the promises she had made had been kept, and they could find the evidence in the budget. So 17 public meetings that we did just during the budget cycle. So this is resilience as a part of a commitment made by an elected leader to fulfill her own aspirations. You know, those 4 E's were her. She didn't get that from a Ford Foundation consultant. She got that from thinking about how what she had felt that she couldn't achieve when she was just a social worker or one commissioner. She wanted to be able to engage across all those issues and make real change during her term. So like I said, Pat and I are the 2 spoiled guys working for one great mayor. We're glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim and Pat. Oh, sorry. Could you talk a little bit about how action plans and visioning plans like this are tied to state law required comprehensive plans and the intersection between those elements, those things?
I'm very happy that I have nothing to do with that whatsoever, so that's got to be him.
So for those of us in Florida, every county and city has a comprehensive development master plan, and it's a legal document that has to be developed under state law. And then the citizens, we hope, are engaged in it. Great organizations like 1,000 Friends of Florida fight to keep that right of citizens to be engaged. But I'm a lawyer and an urban planner, and it is really exemplifies kind of the allocation of rights, right? That's what planning and zoning is. It's the right to use land. And then it has ramifications and how public and private land is allocated. So it's a lot of legal stuff, but very important. And it is in our county and in all cities and counties in Florida, it's very much a part of the elected county commission and city commission. Okay, well, all that great civic summary for Florida. What was important and what we cannot be inconsistent with those documents because they're set in law, and the mayor has a responsibility when the commission sets the policy, she's got to implement it. But if you carefully read our documents, they're always a letter in the front from the mayor. And the mayor is saying, okay, I got it. I have to do the things that are required by law, but this is what I want to do. This is where if I'm going to lead, I want to take us to these places. The systems will change those and we'll get there. But if we had articulated it in the way that a standard land use plan does, we would have sort of been caught, you know, in describing what is on the ground in Florida today. And we wanted to have a she's very much, she uses the term future ready. She wants to build a county government that is ready for the changes that are coming in the future. And she needed to do that by carefully creating these documents in a way that they were legal, but she was articulating a vision. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That was a perfect lead-in because we live in a town that lives by the comprehensive plan, and it's great to a point. It is not so much future-ready. It's sort of like, looking in the rearview mirror. So, what I'm getting from your talk is that the vision and the impetus from this came directly from the mayor. Do you have examples, either of past leaders or other leaders that you know that similarly, well, when you don't have that kind of leadership, how do you then inspire or ask for, require this kind of thing, as if an impending hurricane wouldn't be enough? How else do you make it as required as a comprehensive plan to have a strategic plan?
Question. You want to go first on this one? Well, that's a really good question because it's sort of in a when you don't have somebody willing to lead into these areas, then how do you go about trying to move down the road, at least incrementally, till that leader, appears perhaps out of the community action that is generated. Probably back to some of what Joe was talking about, how communities get organized at neighborhood level, be it the Olinsky approach or another one. You don't want to leave a vacuum, right? If you leave a vacuum, something's going to fill it. And it'll probably be other interests in the community who have different agendas. So whatever works in your city or county, you need to keep it active while you're waiting for that leader that'll really make the jump. Because you're creating hopefully a situation where they can take advantage of that work that's done by not-for-profit organizations. We have a strong link to the business community also, not that we're always in agreement with them, but where we can find agreement, how they can work with us. But I think that's the most important thing to me is, nature abhors a vacuum. And so something needs to be active as you're waiting for that dynamic leader to come along. Like I said, neither of us would be here if we were a different mayor.
I was about to say that I think we wouldn't be here talking about this because the three other people of the 15 that were running against her, the three that were collective impact, what's that mean? They have no idea. The mayor could do a master's thesis on collective impact and talks about it. When someone comes in to talk to her about it, she talks in those terms. So I think it comes back to kind of what my question is like, how do we just start educating our local leaders who are going to be the future, right? I mean, it may not be the guy or the woman who's been doing it for 30 years, right? And maybe your words would be wasted on them, but how do you get the new person who's in 2 years, 4 years, this is probably what they're going to be doing, since our elected seem to think they should stay there for a long, long time, just kind of move to a different place. But how do we start having that conversation? It's probably something Bob's doing, I think, but this is the organization I think that can really start that conversation going, because I think that if we don't do that, we're I don't want to be negative, but I think we're doomed if we don't really start regrowing that. I mean, this is a state of Lawton Childs and Bob Graham. I mean, two of the biggest, civic cheerleaders, I think, in the country. Who came after them, right? I mean, I don't want to blame them for not growing the bench strength here, but clearly we don't have it. And how do we, as residents and citizens and people who are civic health practitioners, help those leaders grow into something that they don't even know they need to become apprised of?
Well, actually, we're going to have to wrap this part up, but y'all will be here during the reception, right, for additional questions? Yeah, wonderful. All right, thank you.